Hi guys, Arthur here from Homeowner DIY. In today's video, I am going to conceal a water main with a water meter in this commercial space. Now this commercial space will be for martial arts later on, so for safety purposes, the water meter needs to be enclosed into something so if anyone goes crashing into it, that they don't get injured. Now this water meter comes up on the inside of the wall. I don't know why it does, but it doesn't look bad per se. But for what this room is going to be used for, it would look god awful. So it needs to be concealed. So this will be a blueprint if you want to box something in. This will show you a very simple way to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a box. I'm going to drywall it, put corner bead, tape it, mud it, sand it, make it look as pretty as possible. And to finish off, I'm also going to put a couple access panels so the main water shutoff is accessible, as well as the water meter in case it needs to be replaced later on. So what we'll do now is we'll look at our water meter and then we'll see what we can do with it. Alright, so this is our water meter here. I've already done this wall. It's not quite finished yet, but to make this look better, I'm going to build a box around it. There'll be an access panel on this side, one on this for the meter, and then one for the stop to make sure everything is serviceable. So with that in mind, all we'll do now is material and tools. Alright, this is our materials list. So I've got a sheet of 5/8 fireboard in the back. I got 3-inch screws, 1.25 inch drywall screws. I got 3 access panels. I got a 6x6, an 8x8, and then a 6x9. I've got 2 8-foot lengths of 2x2. I've got 1 outside corner bead, drywall tape, sill gasket, loading mud, and then finishing mud. Guys, this is what I believe I need for material for this project. So what we'll do now is the tools list. All right, this is our tools list. So I have my cordless kit. I think I only need the drill. I got my mixer, my drywall kit, so of the various putty knives, scissors, circular saw, stapler for hand tools. I have speed square, measuring tape, pencils, my mixing bucket, cleaning bucket, and then a 2-foot level. Guys, this is what I believe I need for tools for this job. So let's get started. Alright, so this is the box that I made. I realize now that I think I want to go bigger, so I'm going to extend it to here, kick this out in case this ever needs to be removed, but I'll go and cut through all the pieces now. Because I'm using a 2x2, I'm drilling pilot holes for the screws. If you don't drill pilot holes for these number 8 screws, you're just going to crack the wood. Moving on to the base plate, because the wood is touching concrete, I put a sill gasket in. Now I didn't use a ram set to pin the base plate to the concrete for one simple reason, that if the water main somehow cracked due to the vibration, I'd have no way to shut the water off because I don't know where the curb stop is for this commercial space. For the top piece of this box, when I put the screws into the drywall, I'm screwing into a stud. Don't just screw into drywall because then the box will not be solid to anything. So by screwing into the studs, this box will be nice and strong and it's not going to go anywhere. This is our finished box. So we have 3 vertical supports. Everything's screwed together. It's nice and solid to the wall. This concludes the framing portion. So what we'll do now is we will start with the drywall portion. So I'm going to start with the top. This is just like boarding anything else. Make sure the head of the screw is just below the surface of the drywall. Also, don't make sure that you don't go through the paper itself, otherwise you'll have to move the screw. And here on the one side, I'm going to put a piece in between the two just because I was out of material and I didn't want to use a whole new sheet for something so small. Alright, so this is the box that's now been boarded. So I'm going to do the inside corners with tape. So that, and that. And then I'm going to use outside corner bead for the outsides. So that is my loading mud. That is it there. So the first thing I'm going to do is we'll do the top here with our corner bead. I'll dry fit everything on. We'll do the tape. Once everything is ready to go, I will load up the joints with our loading mud, and then we will encase the tape and the corner bead into our mud. Okay, so for our corner bead, we'll put it right on the edge, and then using tin snips because there's metal. Alright, so for the very corner, this is the way I'm going to do it. Have it underneath here. And now for the very top, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this on a 45. So push the two pieces together. Guys, remember, we don't want stuff to overlap because it's going to take more mud to fix the hump. So we have that there. And my tin snips aren't the greatest, but like this here, how it's sticking up, just take a hammer and just tap it so it's flat. So now we'll take our tape, we'll go into the corner. And guys, once again, cut it slightly short. Coat the drywall with the loading mud. Make sure that you don't leave any dry spots because you will get a bubble at the dry spot later on. And also for the corner bead, make sure to soak the paper. You can see the water dripping off it. So for the inside corners using the tape, I think it's easier to fold the tape and then get it wet, and it'll be the same thing. Coat the drywall with the loading mud first, put the tape into the corner, and then gently push the tape in, and make sure that you have no dry spots. So as I'm going along, I'm pushing the corner bead and the tape tight into the mud. Do this as you go, and once the box is done, I'll go back and then start encasing the corner bead and the tape in the loading mud. I forgot to mention this earlier, but mark the center of the meter and the valve handle before you put the drywall on, so you know where to cut later on. Alright, so I've now I've put the loading mud on, I put the corner bead, I put the tape on. Make sure your corner bead and your tape is tight. Don't leave any air pockets, stuff like this here. Make sure that you get that out. But now with the loading mud on, I'm gonna start to encase everything. So when it comes to encasing it, you just want a thin layer. If you put on a lot, then you have more work to smooth it out later on. So I am starting off with a 4-inch knife. Generally, I would say start with a smaller knife, and then for each coat, start to go bigger. This will be something of experience as well. But a key thing here is try to get the loading mud as smooth as you can. You don't want any major humps. If you can't fix an area, then leave it and then you can fix it on the next pass. But try to keep the mud minimal to just what you need. Alright, so that is the loading mud. Everything is encased. So I'm going to give this time to dry before I start my next coat. So for this corner bead, because the corner here is farther out, I suggest you go like this. That way the distance will be closer going across. Guys, like I said, I've never actually been taught how to do this before, but that is the first coat. I'm gonna get a heater and start getting some heat on this to help it dry quicker, because it is so cold in here. After 3 days, my wall that I did over here, the corners still weren't dry. Alright, so it's been about 3 hours. Everything now has been dried with the heater. So the first thing is just go over and then lightly scrape off any of the high spots. So scrape very lightly. You're not trying to dig into the mud. Just let the blade do its work itself. Alright, so I've already mixed up my finishing compound. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my 4 and my 8-inch knife, and I'm going to go back and forth, and I'm going to do the next coat. So the top here, I expect to encase it. Really, I expect, like with this being so small, I expect to encase everything. But here, now we want to go thin layers, and we want to start to go wider. I'm using the 8-inch knife here, but I would suggest use the 8 and the 4-inch back and forth as you need to. And then in between passes, make sure that you scrape off the excess mud. So for an inside corner, what I'll do is I'll try to get the mud to come farther out than the actual cornering tool will do itself, and then I'll try to float everything out after. And stuff like this, a hard piece of mud you want to get rid of, it'll just mangle up your job. So now I'll take the outside cornering tool, and then I'm going to do the same thing. So what I've noticed with this tool, you really need to go on a steep angle to get a nice corner out of it. And then guys, once again, make sure that you take off the excess mud, because that'll mangle up your next pass. So with both inside and outside corner tools, if you're able to, try to go both ways, not just one, because that'll be better to fill. So for this pass here, I'm gonna go tight to the right, and then I'm gonna float this side out a little bit, because I'm going to go across with the cornering tool to try to smooth everything out. And I'll grab my 12-inch knife and just go across very gently. Alright, so that is going to be it for this coat of mud. So this is my first coat of finishing mud. And guys, like I said, this will probably get encased, that encased, this will go a little bit wider. This has already been encased, and then this will all be encased as well. But for 3 hours with heat for drying, it took me a half an hour to do the next coat. I know this is small, but guys, as I've said, stuff like this is going to be very difficult to find somebody to do this type of job for you because it's so small. But with that in mind, we're going to let it dry, and then we'll come back when it's dry and we're ready to do our second coat of finishing mud. Alright, I went ahead and I did my coats already. The reason that I did it without filming is because one of the co-owners of this place went ahead and they sanded my work when it wasn't ready, so I had to go back and fix it. But now the mud is done, so we're going to get to sanding. So once again, just really quickly, any high spots, just take that out. Now, if you did a decent job with your mud, you'll have minimum sanding, but sanding is what you're going to have to do regardless how good you are. Guys, keep in mind, when you are sanding off mud, you're spending time and you're also sanding off money, so you want to minimize how much you do it. But just feel for any high spots or anything that needs to be smoothed out, and depending on your skill level, it shouldn't take you very long to sand. For sanding, sand in a circular motion. For the inside corners, it's okay to sand in a straight line. But if you sand in a circular motion, then you're not going to get lines in your mud. Also, sand very lightly. Let the coarseness of the block do the work. Alright guys, so now with the light test, what you're doing is looking for shadows like this. Something like this. So I am going to sand this a little bit more, but this is what you want to be pretty close to. You don't want to see any major lines or a major shadow. So a major shadow, something like this, where you can see the top side here. But I'll go ahead and smooth this out a little bit more, and then we'll get ready to put on the panels. Alright, so we're going to put our access panels. So I made the mark here and a mark here. This is the center of the meter, this is the center of the valve. So I want this box, the center, and then this side here to be at the same elevation. So if we measure off 11 3/4 and 25, alright, so this is our box. It has the screw holes there. So guys, I mean, this is relatively straightforward, but we want to mount the box so it opens towards the wall. Don't do it like this. These will be harder to get to. And then the screws here are these little tiny screws that won't even go through the drywall, but this is what they've supplied with this panel, so that's what I'm going to go with. But what I'm going to do is I'll take the panel, I'll trace it around, and then I will cut on the inside here, and then these screws will go into the drywall. It's not the ideal way to do this, but this is what they've provided, and this is not going to be subject to any type of stress, so this should be fine. So I'm taking the level and I'm going to draw a level line from my original mark. I would suggest not going off the concrete because the concrete is more than likely not going to be level. So by using the level in the way I'm doing it now, you're going to have a nice straight line all the way across. So for this one panel, I'm going to do a friction fit. I'm going to make it tight in the drywall. They have screw holes, but that would look hideously ugly, so I think a friction fit is better. So for this one panel, this has a snap-in cover. It doesn't have a hinge. So the casing around the outside is where you'd put the screws, which would be visible after installation. So for each cover, make sure that you put a level on it to make sure it's nice and level all the way across. If it's crooked, then you're going to notice it later on and it just won't look as nice. So make sure that everything is nice and level and you'll be good to go. Alright, so this is the finished water meter box. Unfortunately, this cover and this cover are a different color from this one. It's not a big deal. I would have liked everything to match, but everything is now accessible. It looks a lot better than it did before. It's also not a safety hazard now, so I'm happy with this. It's a little bit more work than I thought it'd be, but the customer is happy with it as well. So what we'll do now is an overview of this job. Alright guys, so that concludes this project. So this little box, it was, a half an hour of work for mudding and then a bunch of hours to dry and then another half an hour. You really do have to take your time, let the mud dry, otherwise you're not going to be able to build on it if it's still wet. I did hit it with the heater, but it still took hours between coats for it to dry. Now, I had other things to do in this commercial space. That's why this wasn't a big deal for me. But for you to try to find something to do something like this, it's going to be rather difficult. The time on this job. The time was about 5 hours in total. The drying time was probably like 25 hours, something ridiculous. Even using the space heater, it still took probably 4 or 5 hours between coats, and that's lighter coats. Guys, one thing to keep in mind is the outside temperature is going to be a factor. If this was the summertime, then this would probably dry a lot faster. But I used the space heater in between coats when I could, and that sped up the process. But once again, this is not a 1 day's job. This will take a few days to get to where you want. The cost of this job. The lumber, drywall, mud, screws, tape, corner bead, and anything else. The cost was probably about $90. This wasn't expensive, but you need a lot of little things to do a job like this. Otherwise, the box is now done. It's just waiting for paint for when the painters come to finish it. Everything looks good. This will pass inspection when the time comes, so I'm happy with this, and this will also keep people using the space safer than crashing into an exposed water main. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something. I hope something here is going to help you on your project when you need to go ahead and do that. Guys, till next time, please hit the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next project.